Welcome, everyone. Now, according to Iran's ambassador to Russia, Qasem Jalali, relations between the two countries are rising to a completely new level. This as the foreign ministers of the two countries have over the past day discussed a number of matters, including security issues in Moscow. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's Russia visit has involved around bilateral issues, regional and international matters that affect both countries, including the Caucasus agenda, Central Asia, Afghanistan, regional security, and the Caspian Sea. Also of grave importance is dialogue around Iran's nuclear program and growing cooperation between Moscow and Tehran at the United Nations. Now, this growing relationship, its ramifications, and how it fits into the narrative of a shifting world order toward multipolarization is the focus of this Spotlight program. But first, let's get started right after this report.
The synergy between Iran and Russia, born from mutual countering of the Western global order and sanctions regime, is accelerating a unifying trajectory among various nations. Together, they are shaping an international framework that emphasizes multilateralism.
The Western powers, rather than promoting globalization and unity, are seeking division. Iran, Russia, and other countries aim to confront these illegal measures by forming a bloc. In my opinion, these efforts are intensifying, with many countries working to neutralize the sanctions that are devastating our economies.
Lavrov was speaking at a joint press conference with his visiting Iranian counterpart in Moscow. Abbas Araghchi said Tehran values Moscow's stance on Iran's nuclear program, as well as the practical role Russia has played, a partnership that reflects a shared, long-term worldview on global issues.
Russia upholds Iran's right to a peaceful nuclear program. Russia maintains its nuclear cooperation with Iran, which has existed in the past and continues to this day, including its positive role in the Bushehr nuclear power plant. Russia played a highly constructive role in the JCPOA, and its position in the Security Council was very helpful in responding to the illegal move by the US and European countries, the so-called snapback mechanism. Russia adopted a stance that was both lawful and reasonable.
During the recent 12-day war initiated by the US and Israel against Iran, Russia not only condemned the hostilities but also engaged in subsequent talks, which led to the signing of new defense agreements between the two countries.
We appreciate Russia's stance in condemning the US-Israeli attacks against Iran and expressing solidarity and support for Iranian people.
The assertive posture of US unilateralism is prompting a strategic realignment, as independent nations work to intensify cooperation and diversify their international frameworks. As a key example, Iran-Russia partnership seeks to strengthen multilateralism, offering a credible alternative model for the global South nations.
And now for your guests. Joining us, Mr. Reza Vedadi, academic researcher and author, joining us out of London. And Mr. Don DeBar, activist and commentator, joining us out of New York in the States. Gentlemen, hello. I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess we'll start there in the States with you, Mr. Don DeBar. Pleasure to have you, sir. Your initial thoughts at this point in history, the challenges that both Iran and Russia face today, challenges posed mostly by the West, I should say, drawing these two entities to forge closer ties. Your initial take?
There's a number of different forces at work, really. The historical forces that are both consequent to the U.S. post-World War II order kind of, sort of unraveling, having fulfilled whatever purpose or reached its zenith in conquering almost the world and encountering now a world where everywhere people who have been subjugated are rising up, and alternatives to a monopole run from Washington or London or Wall Street have shown themselves to be as viable or more viable as that which people have endured. The very heart of the Western construct, the US and Europe, the people there, the majority, have seen 40 or 50 years of austerity, official austerity programs, a decline in real terms in the standard of living. I mean, there have been new toys and things to occupy people's time and attention, and there have been paper increases in salary, but costs have gone up faster, and the real share of wealth has been concentrated in fewer and fewer hands, along with power. In other words, along with the ability to make changes to the circumstances that people are suffering. And so not only is the periphery starting to fall away into the unfolding multipolar world around China, Russia, say Iran, Venezuela, and others in the next tier, but even at the heart of this empire, there's great dissatisfaction. Trump and a number of others in European countries are evidence of this, and so this is a logical, portion of that process that people who are building an alternative would, formalize the relationships and further develop them. We're going to see a lot more of this.
All right, good stuff, Don. Great way to kick off the program. Reza, thanks for your patience, bud. Welcome to the conversation. So we have, to Don's point, he said a number of forces at work. I'm going to name two right now. Both countries are heavily sanctioned by Europe and the U.S. lately, both demonized for standing against Western dictates, whether it's Russia opposing a NATO eastward expansion right up to its doorstep, hence the Ukraine war, or Iran exercising its right to have a peaceful nuclear program. Your opening take, Reza, on the juncture these two countries are at today and what's brought them together?
If we go back maybe just over a decade, Iran wasn't very close to Russia. Russia was still in the early 10s or late 2000s trying to merge itself into the Western bloc, into the NATO bloc. And when it was rebuffed by the United States and the Europeans, it realized that no matter how hard it tries, it cannot appease the United States apparatus. Same thing for Iran. Iran tried to negotiate the JCPOA in 2015. It was successful, but nothing came of it. The worst situation came out where Iran for 10 years was set back. All the nuclear capabilities that they had developed with the heavy water and so forth were destroyed just to appease the United States and the Europeans. However, then they started to negotiate the beginning of this year, and then there was the first, the 12-day war attack by Israel and the United States. And it was the German Chancellor who said that the Israelis are doing the dirty work for us. So it was a European support as well. I think these two countries have realized that there's no way they can collaborate, work with the Western Bloc as it is at the moment. The Western Bloc does not accept any other power to rise. The Europeans are more of a sidekick to the United States' main character syndrome. And so whatever the United States decides, the Europeans are following. The elites are hand in hand anyway, as my colleague said, in London and Berlin and New York. So I think the Russians and Iranians have realized that the best course of action is to work with each other. They're both rich in resources, in natural resources. They both have advanced economies, manufacturing economies. And Iran has demonstrated to the Russians that it's a capable partner in the sense that it's able to defend itself. It has military power, indigenous military power, which has assisted the Russians in the war against Ukraine using the drones and technology. So it can look after the region, it can look after itself, and it's a partner that the Russians and very much more the Chinese would need someone to have on board in this region.
Great. And Don, I'd like to actually ask you to elaborate on the way you kicked it off earlier, the real-time shift in alliances that we're seeing and what it spells for the status quo that you mentioned. You have certain countries getting closer economically and militarily. You have waning U.S. influence in many places in the global south, in West Asia, in East Asia, and even there are a lot of tensions with the European partners nowadays. Where do you see all this going?
I think what we saw happen, I'd say 2014 maybe, were the first real big moves that started to pretty much laid out what's happened since then as a sort of a mandated course. That being when the U.S. tried to take down Russia's economy, trying in essence to impose a replay of 1991, an unwinnable war in the minds of the planners at the Pentagon, being a quagmire in Ukraine, and an economy that fell apart, so that the government would lose the faith and trust of the people, and it would fall. What happened was they attempted to sanction the Russian economy and told Western Europe and the EU members on either West or East Europe, you can't buy cheap energy that sustains your economies from Russia anymore. This was intended to deprive Russia of currency to, participate in other aspects of the global economy, and also to move these customers to the U.S. oil companies, British oil companies, et cetera. And instead, what happened was that China stepped in and showed that it would support Russia in a strategic position like that in the face of the West. And that was the largest business deal in the history of the world at that point, to make the point. And what happened also was that this energy that was now being purchased by China today and into the foreseeable future was not going to support industry and residences, et cetera, infrastructure in Europe, which has since seen, inflation and collapse of major industrial centers across the continent. These have all set the stage for, what we're looking at today, which is the desperation among people, both among the elites in Europe and also among the working class and former middle class in Europe and in the United States as well, which we suffered the same thing here. When they imposed this on Europe, our energy costs went up 50% inside of 3 months back in 2014, and we've been struggling with that ever since too. So I think the big stuff happened when they took Ukraine and tried to weaponize it against Russia and tried to cut Russia out of the global economy. And China countered with, instead, let's start building something alternative. Here we are. The alternative is standing on both feet now.
And Reza, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to put the same question to you. It seems like the days of the unipolar world with dozens of capitals bowing to U.S. or UK dictates is changing. And so are Eastern alliances and those in the global South. Bud, what is this? And from your perspective, is this the beginning of something new, something different, something bigger?
I think discussed this specifically on your show a number of times, where I've said that we have the new world order, the multipolar world is not about to start. It already has begun. It has already started. We have one China as a power on one side. You have Russia on another side. And even Iran is respected as a power in the region. Without Iran, the Strait of Hormuz can be closed. It has influence in Lebanon. It has influence in Iraq. It has influence in Yemen, and this waterway in that section. So these countries, along with India and Brazil and other countries, are working together because they know the long term this American empire is falling apart. And as it falls apart, it becomes erratic and more dangerous. Only today, Donald Trump stated that Venezuela has stolen our oil and our land, and the kind of stuff that they come out with. Donald Trump isn't a anomaly in the sense that he's absurd, and the rest of the U.S. presidents have always been, multipolar lovers. The United States has used different language to achieve the same thing. Biden and Obama would use soft language, but they would kill as many people, if not more, and they would try to take resources as well. So Trump just shows the real face. He removes the mask of fake human rights and dialogue and democracy and shows America for what it is without that. So I think the world has realized that, and that's why there's a big move among the non-aligned movement of countries, that they realize that they need to move away from the US dollar, they need to move away from relying on the United States, and to some extent, unfortunately, for Europe, because Europe has, as I said, played the sidekick, and it's suffering. The lack of cheap energy that would come from the Russians to the Germans has impacted its industry, where the United States is happy to say to the Germans, well, just build your cars in another country. So Europe is deindustrializing, and it's all because they're following, unfortunately, the dangerous policies of the United States.
Thank you. And Don, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, in his joint presser with Sergei Lavrov, he stressed the continuation of close defense and security cooperation between Tehran and Moscow. He went on to say Iran and Russia share common views on international issues, warning that Washington's concept of peace through force pose a serious threat that is part to global security and international law. Okay, we haven't heard too much reference to this before, Don. It seems security and defense cooperation may be one of the growing sector here between the two countries. What would the ramifications of that be and its geopolitical impact?
The agreements are as good as they hold in a military, basically an escalation or an all-out exchange. The United States, the foreign policy of the United States right now is riddled with contradiction, at least apparently. It's difficult for us, even here in New York, looking at it, from a couple hundred miles instead of a few thousand miles away, to understand what's really happening in Washington. But what it appears to be happening is that Trump and the people around him, and perhaps whoever's pulling his strings, have one vision of U.S. Foreign policy and U.S. strategy in the world. And the people that have been in charge of that for the last decades have quite another. You can see the contradiction between what Trump at least says and has tried to do, apparently, in Ukraine. And you can also see the kind of pushback that you're getting from some members of the Senate and House of Representatives here, of both parties, by the way, against Trump's belligerence towards Venezuela, people that have never said a word as the entire regime structure was assembled against Venezuela. Various attempts to assassinate Maduro and the coup against Chavez were never really commented upon by any of these people. Now that Trump's doing what he's doing, they're commenting. And so our foreign policy has this apparent contradiction running right down the center. If the people who were in charge before prevail, I see, a real solid chance of a war. They're calling for a war with Russia at this point. And so a war with Russia would involve Iran under one set of circumstances, and a war without Russia and perhaps among Middle Eastern countries or Asian countries, maybe with China or against China. There's all these different possibilities, and the relationships that are forged between countries that have a like interest vis-a-vis the United States may play out differently in other circumstances. But in the big picture, Iran and China and Russia and Venezuela and a host of others, including most of the continent of Africa and the balance of Asia and South America, have a common interest vis-a-vis the United States and Western Europe. And if things play out outside of a major catastrophic exchange of nuclear weapons or something, then I think you're going to see those countries acting in concert, more so as time passes, including Iran and Russia.
Thank you there, Don. And Reza, I want to put that also to you, this more intimacy in defense and security cooperation between Tehran and Moscow. We're witnessing it, to both of your points, in real time with Moscow and Beijing and Tehran and Beijing. What does this mean for the region and beyond, Reza?
I think that it's better for the region, as Iran has stated, for example, regarding the Caucasus problem, the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, that the regional neighbors and the regional countries resolve these issues. And Iran, for many years now, I know, has, even during the administration of President Rouhani, proposed the peace initiative in the Persian Gulf, where the Persian Gulf will be protected and looked after by the local neighbors, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the Persian Gulf regional countries, without the need for the United States. To be honest, the United States does not need to be there. Saudi Arabia does not need to fear any country other than Israel. If Israel and the United States are removed from the West Asian region, there's no major reason for conflict, and the countries themselves can look after the security of the country. If they need assistance from any country, they can ask then, but there's no need for them to have a major base. The only reason that there's a major basis for the United States in the region is to keep Iran bogged down, or Iran under control, so that it can divide the region and take its resources. And this has been applied to multiple regions around the world. You're seeing it now in real time, live, as it's being done to Venezuela. They've surrounded the country and they won't allow tankers to leave. On what basis are they coming up with these rules? Which international law are they following? It was only today that President Maduro of Venezuela stated that they thanked Iran for trying to upkeep international law. It's come to the point where the country that they used to accuse of being a terrorist state is trying to promote international law, and the country that was the founder, or the countries that were the founders of international law, are completely destroying these international rules and regulations from within.
That's a good point there, Reza. Thank you. And Don, final thoughts with you. No one has to ask, actually, and I'm glad you mentioned the U.S. empire on its last legs on your opening take there, Don. So one has to ask, how did we get here? How's the U.S. lost so much power and influence over the last 100 years in South America, Africa, Europe, and Asia? And what does the rise of emerging alliances mean? I mean, we have BRICS, we have the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Eurasian Economic Union, NAM, the non-aligned movement, if I'm not mistaken, attracting more and more independent countries. What are these leading to these tectonic shifts, and what does this all mean?
At the risk of being misunderstood and thought metaphysical, the dialectical processes of history that, empires rise and fall, and they meet their end as surely as they leave the beginning. The accumulation of wealth and power into fewer and fewer hands, into finally like one point on the entire planet, implies that either that moment will hold forever, which is an absurd thought, or that it will change and power and wealth will become more diffuse. And we're seeing the diffusion occur right before our eyes.
Okay, it seems like we have about a minute left. Reza, I'll put the same question to you. How did the UK and the US, the French and the Germans go from colonization, attempting to carve out the world between themselves, to this point where we're now on the cusp of a future where perhaps the ones carved out of the new global order are them?
This is just, as my colleague said from across the pond, the reality that empires rise and fall, and America has overstretched itself, its abilities, its capabilities, and unfortunately what will happen for them is they will decline, not necessarily maybe a major collapse immediately, but other countries arise, as China has, Russia has, Brazil and India, and Iran will be one of those countries that will arise with them, and there will be a multipolar world, better for everyone else.
All right, gents, pleasure to have you both on. Stay safe to the both of you. Reza Vedadi there joining us from London. Also, Mr. Don DeBar joining us out of New York in the States. And viewers, this brings us to the conclusion of this segment of your Spotlight program. Thank you for tuning in, and bye-bye for now.